9:30, and we are going to open up the special meeting of the Access Advisory Committee. So do we want to take roll call?
Chair Sorgman,
Here.
Vice Chair Marston, Committee Member Chen,
Here.
Committee Member Kovich, Committee Member Kuntz,
Here.
Committee Member Rassler,
Here.
Committee Member Tejada,
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, Brian Demore,
Here.
John Doimus, and Sarita King.
Present. Present.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to call the meeting to order, and the first item here is public comment. Do we have any public comments? Did you fill out the form? No. Does she need to fill out the form? Can she fill it out after she? Okay. So go ahead and talk and then fill out the form so that we.
The podium here or just stand here?
You
Podium,
can go to the
please.
podium so we can hear.
Hello. Can you hear me?
No. Bring the mic closer.
Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Erin Duffy. I'm a local business owner, namely the Yes Store, and I'm also a member of the Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show on the board with the most history in the 61 years of the board being there. I have the most votes in the history of being on a board member there. I emailed this to Brian yesterday. My emails have kind of been getting ignored for a while, so I finally got a response from him right before this. So this is a little outdated, but at Solstice, an SBPD enforcement officer forced me to vacate the legally required ADA fast street parking. I'm a disabled person with a valid parking placard, which was clearly displayed. Since Solstice's weekend long fest, I didn't get to enjoy the next day either for fear of a repeat traumatic event. I refuse to let this happen to me or anyone else on any day of the year, which is why I bring this to your attention. When I looked at the website, it said parking fills up early, so when I arrived first thing in the morning, the city parking enforcement was having cars towed from the block. I asked the two parking officers if I was parked in the right place, and they said, yes, this is where you park. Forcing relocation once was bad enough, but Officer Strom did it 3 times that morning. The final time he was joined by Santa Barbara Parks and Rec employee Sarah Knowles, who said something to the effect of, your tears don't matter and won't change anything. As threats of towing my car away loomed, they forced me to leave the clearly marked ADA street parking by Alameda Park about 5 minutes before the parade start time. This left me in tears to frantically scramble in search of scarcely available last-minute inferior parking while wearing a pretty ridiculous mermaid costume that I had made for the day. Myself. This is a clear violation of Title II of the ADA. This is also a violation of the Bain Act. Forcing relocation on me 3 times demonstrates a systemic, persistent refusal to accommodate and also dismantles any possible defense or excuse by Officer Strom of an accident or good faith mistake. This treatment is illegal and can't happen in our city. What complicates this further is the indication of a cross multi-departmental problem and signals the urgent need for prompt changes. This could include force and immediate potential recurring ADA sensitivity retraining, and this applies to the 2 city officials I mentioned, but also to parking enforcement, possibly the whole BPD, and the Department for Parks and Recreation. City employees should know the laws, but it's especially the sworn duty of the police to serve and protect, not to bully and harass, threaten, and humiliate the weakest and most vulnerable people. I expect anyone with a sense of human decency to consider the emotional distress, the sheer public humiliation of being repeatedly moved in front of the Solstice Festival crowds. The videos I took in the police audio are pathetic and heartbreaking, so is the thought of exposing other innocent people to that kind of pain. We should really expect more from our city workers. Strom and Knowles' intolerant and inhumane actions Saturday at Solstice don't reflect the values we should uphold as a community, and I also believe apologies are in order, but I won't hold my breath. Brian's response was that Micheltrena designated accessibility parking was available throughout the Solstice festivities except during the parade. During that time, the area was needed for disbanding of floats and parade participants, which meant parking was restricted for public safety reasons, and no individuals were singled out for relocation. However, I recognize that some of the signage may have caused confusion about where and when parking parking was allowed. So only during the parade was that where I couldn't park. Thank you for your response, Brian. I was definitely singled out and was relocated multiple times. I was relocated, and the last time I was ejected from the area altogether. Also, there was even a car behind me that had a disabled parking placard displayed and wasn't threatened with tickets, wasn't towed, and the driver was long gone. The explanation you've given is inadequate because the law overrides the logistics of the parade. Under Title II of the ADA, event operations like moving or dismantling floats cannot override designated legally required accessible infrastructure. If the city promises a specific block for disabled parking, the city cannot then simultaneously use that same space for heavy, dangerous parade teardowns that block placard holders. If the city needed to alter the block for float dismantling, the ADA dictates the city is still legally required to establish completely different, clear, equally accessible parking zone nearby and update their public materials, being the Summer Solstice Festival ADA guide and the parking signage. Nowhere does any of that state that the street parking designated for the event was available Friday through Sunday, but not during the actual parade event itself. The only reason Solstice exists is because of the parade. It's not a standalone festival. So this makes no sense at all, and turning me away with a valid parking placard violates the law. The city of Santa Barbara and the event organizers legally promised and officially publicized that disabled parking will be reserved on street near Alameda Park on the westbound lane of Mitchell Traina between Garden and Santa Barbara Street, where I was parked. The city violated accessibility regulations by failing to manage the layout, leaving me stranded without parking at the very last minute. I had specifically planned my morning around my need for accessible parking, even not taking my medication so I could drive, only to have the rug ripped out from under me at the very last minute. The signage isn't the problem. The fact that there's a section that's trying to be reserved for two separate things, like tearing down parade stuff and ADA parking, is the problem. It really just bolsters my position that what happened to me was a violation and clearly illegal and blatantly wrong on very many levels. I ask that you please consider my public comment as you plan for the busy summer of upcoming festivals and as well as for planning for next year's Solstice Festival. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Also, I usually use a walker when I'm going long places, but I use a cane when I have to go short distances, so thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And is there a possibility that I could reach out to you directly?
That'd be great. I reached out to Brian several times. He ignored me until he knew I was going to show up here today, so thank you.
All right. Can I get your phone number?
Can-
Wait, here, just write it down here.
I know we don't have agendized discussion on this topic today, but it will be agendized, and I hope you'll come back and participate.
Thank you.
And I want to share with you that you were not alone. I had a very similar and very frustrating experience at Solstice Parade.
Well, they've been doing this every year, and I feel like because it's an outdoor festival and it's rough terrain, people don't, a lot of disabled people don't show up to this particular festival, so I feel like that section's been being double used, and they've been just doing that for years and years because it's usually empty, relatively empty. And so, this is kind of the first year that I think that it's, I've had to call attention to it, so, but thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll be back for, if I wasn't so upset, I'd stay, but I've just been crying for days now, so this Solstice is my favorite day of the year. It's literally my favorite day of the year, so, and I haven't missed one since 1997 until this year, so thank you so much.
I hope you won't give up on it. I'm
Well, you guys can prove it to me with your actions about change. so
I'm optimistic that we can
Thank you,
get better. We've come a long way already.
and thanks for your response, Brian.
All right. So that ends public comment, or do we have anything else? No? Okay. All right, so the next item is the State Street Master Plan update.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Access Advisory Committee. I really appreciate being in front of you today. My name is Tess Harris. I'm the State Street Master Planner for the city. And with me today, I also have Stefanos Palazoides with Mullen Palazoides and Miguel Nunez with Farron Piers today. Stefanos is really leading the design effort for the master plan and has been on this project more recently in the last 6 months or so, and really it's been a real privilege to get to work with him and his team. And Miguel has been on this project really throughout the process, and it also has been really, really fantastic to work with Miguel and Farron Piers on the transportation elements of the project. Today I'm gonna go through the first couple slides pretty quickly, and really I want to focus on the design element where Stefanos will sort of talk through, and then I have a couple questions at the end that I'm hoping that this committee can respond to, as well as just an opportunity if you have questions or comments as we're finalizing the master plan. It would be really helpful to get your input. Some of the specific questions, that just going through this process that I think this board in particular would provide a lot of value is really understanding where on State Street, when you are on the street itself, taking away, recognizing that the community has this sort of debate on the types of transportation that are on the street. But when you are on State Street itself, what are some of the challenges that you face that this project could potentially help address? And then also, as we're looking at paving and surface treatment on the street, recognizing different needs for different people, but what are some things that could help signal that you're entering a different space, like going from a pedestrian zone to a bike or vehicle area? And there are certainly things that the design team is aware of, but in your experience, I think you would bring a lot of value to that conversation. So I'm hoping that that you can talk a little bit about that in comments. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, except to say that there are a lot of key challenges. And this slide talks about the key challenges around retail shifts, around mobility conflicts, around activation gaps, and around aging infrastructure. Recognizing that our drainage infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure is either not there in many locations or is getting pretty old, as well as our utility lines in the street, sort of varying where they're located and really in need of an update. And then as things have changed over the years in terms of e-commerce and recognizing the shifts from large department stores to just a changing way in the way that people experience downtowns in general, not just in Santa Barbara, that's a really important piece. And that ties into the activation gap area where we see areas on State Street currently that typically have more people or do better because they have businesses that are operating for longer hours or for hours that go beyond 5 or 6 p.m. And we have certain locations, like in the center, that are really retail focused around sort of the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. time range, where where people are there during that time. But outside of that time, it's pretty quiet in that area. So that's a challenge that we see. And then there's lots of opportunities as well. And this slide is intended to show that there's a significant amount of tourism spending in our community. We have over 1 million residents, over 1 million visitors that come onto State Street, and a lot of investment in the area as well as change in the collisions that have occurred between vehicles and pedestrians and vehicles and cyclists. This next slide shows a timeline for since 1925. There's much more history in the master plan document itself. The plan document goes through history well before then, so I encourage you to read it if you're interested. And Stefanos will talk in more detail about this. The point of this slide is really just to emphasize that this isn't the first time we are changing State Street. We changed State Street in the late 60s when we created the 6-block plaza and changed the street from 4 vehicle lanes down to 2 vehicle lanes and removed all parking on the street. We changed it again in the 70s and 80s when we expanded the plaza 2 additional blocks, Coda or Haley up to Ortega streets. And there have been changes, obviously, since then with the during COVID-19 and with the promenade that you were seeing today. And this plan really is looking at what is the opportunity for the next 50-plus years for our community. How can we design a space that can be accommodating for us right now and for the future community and things that we may not be able to fully understand in terms of how people are using the space. I am not going to talk about this slide except to say that there was a lot of engagement that occurred throughout the process over the last 5 years. This slide shows just details around the number of engagement workshops and events and meetings, and there was a lot in a lot of different formats. And there were a lot of takeaways too. I think this is important, but the next slide actually is going to show a little bit more than the engagement takeaways. I mean, really, the walkability in the public realm was emphasized throughout and continues to be emphasized. The landscaping and the need for tree canopy coverage was also emphasized. We had overwhelming response to that. And safety and quality of life, and a balance for prioritizing walking, cycling, and transit on the corridor as well. These are the goals for the State Street Master Plan. There's 10 goals that were identified by the State Street Advisory Committee. And when we look at the plan and when we've looked at different iterations of design, we always come back to this slide and try to ensure that the project can meet as many or all of these goals as possible. So recognizing that Santa Barbara is different and should be distinct from any other downtowns, growing our urban canopy, expanding access within downtown for all different users and modes, retaining and mix and creating sort of a mix of business, catalyzing housing downtown, and ensuring that it's a pedestrian-focused State Street Paseo. I'm going to pass it over to Stefanos now to give a brief overview on the design elements.
But can I just ask this question? One of those slides that you showed the participation, or
Yes.
I don't know, it was 500 or 5,000
The
people.
engagement, yep.
But that's a tiny. I mean, if we have a population of 1 million people, I mean, that's like 0.5% of the community that's responded to this. So how do we kind of
So
those together?
so the online survey responses, that number came from the 6 months after it was sent out. That's the largest survey response the city's ever had for any project.
But that still doesn't constitute not even 1% of our population. So I'm just wondering, how does the city reconcile the fact that very few people have participated in this?
It is more than 1%. We're
it?
about 80,000 people.
Okay, I
So
thought we were
it's
a
about
million.
almost 6,000 people out of 80. Not quite 10%, but more than 5% of the population that responded to that.
Okay.
So I'll pass it off to Stefanos.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning to all. I'm very much looking forward to a discussion on the principal outline of the of this plan, and particularly focused on your input or your design input. Let me just say in introduction that the work we've done aim to arrive at some kind of a design accommodation between the possibility of using this corridor for different uses in different ways, and in that respect try to resolve large-scale planning questions and not so much particular design questions. So it is our assumption that whatever gets designed and built here over the next period of time is going to be all ADA accessible, every last part of it, and it will be particularly important for you to focus on giving us advice about where you think the key design questions would be from your experience in the length and breadth of this project, as I'm going to try to describe it to you. The first slide speaks to the issue of history. History is very important in that change is, of course, inevitable. The street has changed significantly over the last 150 years. It had transit at the beginning of the century, and as cars came into existence, it came to grow into a typical American main street with parking on both sides and 2 lanes in the middle, and with vehicles, as you can see top right, in the 1950s dominating. And then the design of the 60s and early 70s turned the street into pretty much what it used to be before COVID. Then it was closed down with COVID, and now we're coming to the point of needing to rethink it. In fact, in fact, there are some standard issues that are common between these changes over time, and multimodality and the reduction of the presence of cars on the street is a constant, and particularly with an emphasis on allowing people to park and walk rather than park in front of individual businesses and go directly in. I think that this downtown although it's unusually long, very long, much longer than probably any other downtown in California, or in the country as far as I know, is divided into a number of zones. It begins at the waterfront with a pier, continues with a funk zone, and there are three. The 10 or so blocks are divided into three zones: an entertainment zone on the water side, a civic and commercial zone, heavily commercial zone in the center, and an art zone and commercial zone, of course, to the north. What is particularly notable, I think, and comparable to other places in Southern California, is the balance between the amount of retail space available, and most of it being used at about 800,000 square feet, total square feet, and about 4,000 cars in parking stalls, in lots, and in garages, which are arrayed across and along the entire length of the street on both sides. That represents an enormous investment on the part of the city, which has gone on now for almost 50 to 60 years, and it also speaks to the way in which this kind of downtown is typical of other successful downtowns throughout Southern California, which by limiting the amount of parking, encourage walking. Typically, parking ratios are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 cars per thousand, depending how car-oriented places are. And in this kind of downtown, the ratio is 2 per, which is very much a definition of the kind of downtown where one parks and walks. Let me just try to describe to you the typical sectional solution that we're foreseeing for this project. I think that an architectural section is a drawing that cuts vertically through a plane, and you can see and imagine this being a drawing which has a cut through two buildings on the side and a cut on the street at the bottom. The sides of the buildings continuous with the street in a U-shaped kind of pattern, and the middle of the 80-foot wide street is taken up by two emergency lanes that are 20 feet wide. This actually is a necessary feature of the street, and it would be a necessary feature of any other street of its kind, in that it provides emergency access for fire and police. And what this does, in the case of this particular version of State Street, it allows us to have two pedestrian sidewalks that are 30 feet wide on either side. We see this way of circulating as being controlled by electrically operated bollards. There is 4 bollards that are spaced 5 feet apart on this 20 feet of street in the middle of the block, and then the existing landscape stays where it is now for the bottom 3 and the top 3 blocks of this project, and it is replaced by a new canopy of trees in the middle, and perhaps a new treatment of the ground in the middle as well of that portion of State Street, as a way of actually articulating the destination importance and the cultural importance and the general importance of the center of the city in the life in your life, in the life of this community, but also in more general terms in its importance in California as a state, in the country as a whole. Retractable bollards are not uncommon. It's a pretty dependable system of controlling traffic, both here and abroad. These are resistance to collision up to 25, 30 miles per hour. They're important ways of controlling and securing streets as they move from an operation during the pedestrian dominant times and service and other vehicle use times. The system we're suggesting is really a flex system by which the street is sometimes open to traffic and sometimes not open to traffic. Next, please. It's important to note that in on all blocks, the sidewalks are pushed out probably to virtually almost double the size of the sidewalk on either side of the central 20 feet of lane. On the 3 blocks to the bottom and 3 to the top, we are proposing that we keep the landscape that exists, renew it, refine it, remove some of the base barriers to make for a more horizontally accessible and open landscape wall to wall in the street. Next, in the middle section, we are keeping some of the important landscape features that are commanding and mature and extremely important, and then putting forth a canopy of sycamore trees, which will provide enough shade in the summer to really make the street usable, probably in a 10 to 15 year period, probably of growth. And then on the third section at the north, similarly, the sidewalks are enlarged. You can see provisions for outdoor dining and a landscape which continues and refines and regenerates the existing horticultural condition. There is also there's also one parking space for transit on each side of the street on all 10 blocks, and a total of 4 crossings, 2 at the ends of the blocks and two in the middle. So there's a total of 4 crossings from side to side. The intention is that as much as possible, people should be able to move from one side of the street to the other. I didn't tell you, by the way, and I can say it now, that we are also trying to minimize the discontinuity of the street from the perspective of curbing it. So we're thinking about rolled curbs as opposed to vertical 4-inch rolled curbs as opposed to 6-inch vertical curbs, and also paving, continuing the existing paving on the sidewalk, north and south blocks, in the center blocks, probably paving it in stone perhaps, and the street itself being paved in a way that differentiates between the place where bicycles ride and where perhaps wider use by vehicles might happen on the sides. Any change of material would probably have will involve the use of materials that are equally non-slip in order to make sure that people can operate and bicycles can work their way across and along this path in a way that is safe. And the north-south paving for the middle 20 feet is going to be significantly different in its definition than the sidewalks, so that one can distinguish the places that are meant to be for multiple use in terms of modes as opposed to the ones that are purely pedestrian. There can be, and there will be, I hope, various levels of articulation in terms of art on this project, both on the ground and in bancos, in planters, in sculpture, in a variety of ways as we go forward with design that would bring forth not only the overall character of the 9 blocks, but also the character of particular districts. Next. And a reminder that the canopy, of course, is an aspect of some of the greatest. A strong, powerful, present canopy is an aspect of most great streets in the world, and you can see it illustrated here. We would hope to get into something like that. I spoke before about removing some of the underground growth. Part of the growth that is very, very prominent today on the base of trees is there, I think, to planted in the 1960s to make sure that people were protected from moving cars, because in fact there was no parking to protect them, and I think this has grown into be a barrier now, visual and otherwise a barrier from access right to left, from side to side, I should say, almost along the entire street. There's going to be a provision for proper lighting, both broad lighting, lighting from stores and so on, sitting arrangements, and proper definition of dining parts of sidewalks. So this is a view of the middle part, the civic part of this site as it exists today. It is basically a street, a car-dominated, or design-wise, a car-dominated design environment. And our hope is that based on what we are suggesting we're doing, we would transform it as you see here, and I would like to describe this to you: an ample canopy, a particular distinction of the ground plane into zones of circulation, both divided by bicycles and non-bicycles, and also north and south movement. And on either side of the central portion, there are zones for transition for 3 feet for possible parking override in case some emergency vehicle has to park there, opening of doors and things like that. Then 4 feet for bicycle storage, art sitting, etc. And then a sidewalk of virtually 23, 25 feet for both sitting and dining and walking both. You can see also in this image that the central portion, out of the central 20 feet, there are bicycles going up on one side at 10 of these feet, and on the other side, the 10 of the feet with bicycles, and the corridor shared also with an electric shuttle. I don't think the sense is that the shuttle needs to be exactly that way. I recognize that shuttles can be friendlier in ADA terms, some than others. The notion is that there ought to be a shuttle that connects all the way from the waterfront all the way up to Arlington and Sola above that. The second image shows a portion of the site that is similarly there on the north side of the corridor. And this is also transformed in a very similar way. I think it's very similar but different in that the trees in place are the existing ones, either replanted, rejuvenated, or certainly better kept. And similar allocation of zoning for movement to the center and for particular uses on the sides, as in the first slide. One of the things to really understand is that the intention of a place like this is not to turn the whole thing into a single plane, but the middle part of the site is also used by becoming slightly convex and by being built underneath the pavement in a manner that allows the gathering of water rainwater, and its long-term storage, and also the enabling of its flow downhill. That this whole thing becomes really in the middle a systemic aspect of the definition of this design that makes this a special street as opposed to just a 9 block long park. The intention very much is to see to it that the space between the two walls 80 feet apart is fully utilized with pedestrian activity. We have 2,000 bikes a day at peak times. It's a remarkable national number. It's extremely unusual number, and this is one of the reasons why the making of a flex scheme put in place both justifies the dominance of pedestrian and vehicle activities at some points of the day and vehicle activities at other points of the day, the exact times to be determined at a later point. One of the issues about the flat street alternative the flat street alternative is really not entirely possible because of this question of the civil engineering question of treating, keeping, gathering the water and percolating it, and also allowing to flow downhill. But also because any flat scheme would also necessitate an enormous, the very prominent presence of bollards at relatively short distance from each other, hundreds of them over a nine block stretch. And just some image of what the sidewalks would be like. This is the portion of the site on the southern portion of the street where currently there is a little bit of an indication of how one would come to narrow. This is the installation that's currently in place. Some of you might have seen it or been on it. This is as large as the new sidewalks would be, but the intention would not be to patch them together in this particular way next, but to actually see them as being integrated designed by extending the existing finishes all the way to the central 20 feet and allowing the sidewalk to be so wide as to have the trees happening essentially in the middle of it, generating this way an extremely unusual kind of environment that is unique to Santa Barbara and unique to this particular corridor. There are major and interesting questions about intersections. I think there is an opportunity in this scheme to bollard. I think the next one is a better one to show. We don't have that one. Okay, so we discussed last night in some great detail this particular version. The red bollards are placed where you see them under the theory that that the pedestrians would crossing laterally State Street would be protected from bicycles coming down on the corridor. Under serious discussion over a couple of previous meetings, we've decided to move the bollards forward to the other side of the walking path of the crossing of the pedestrians, as a way of actually stopping the temptation by motorists to actually turn and use that little nook in the street for dropping off or other kinds of purposes. There's going to be a lot of drop off on the side streets as well, and on all four sides of the side streets adjacent to State Street as well, and so I think that as I said in the beginning, this has been 6 months of intense effort to talk to people at various levels, looking at this project with different ideas in mind, having thought about it in creative and different ways over time. And our recommendation is really, from a design point of view, a kind of master plan level recommendation, a way of resolving the big questions of balance between mobility, infrastructure, infrastructure issues, issues of performance, retail performance for the corridor, and so on, and the very detailed questions of textures, of as I said, ADA performance across the board and otherwise. All of those things will be handled in detail during the next phase of design, which would be really a schematic level design at every level. That's why I said in the beginning that we could certainly answer any general question you would have about the scheme, but and which we think is the one that best accommodates itself to the multiple kinds of demands, or the multiple kinds of requirements for all kinds of issues along its way. But most importantly, I think you could give us some thoughts about how you think the issues that you are so well set up to discuss could affect our work in the future in more detailed terms.
And so now I'm going to just briefly talk through the council action in April and what we are, kind of the next steps in the process, and then the questions before this committee as well. At the end of April, we went to City Council to present the draft master plan. And the purpose of that meeting was really to understand if we were on the right track and if we could get public comment, get additional input from committees and commissions, and then finalize the plan given that overall design approach. We got generally favorable feedback from City Council on the overall plan, on the framework for the design, and on the idea of 30-foot sidewalks with the 20-foot travel lane emergency access area. We've been going to different commissions and committees and have a couple more in this process. And we'll be taking all of the public comment from those commissions and committees and compiling them and sharing that with City Council, as well as incorporating comments where it's possible in the plan itself. We also have a public comment period that's open until Tuesday for all members of the public. It's been open since the council event in April, and so have been getting, it's well over 1,000 comments from members of the public since a couple months back. And so we'll be compiling those comments and summarizing them as well, and sharing those with council also. What we're here today really is to ask similar questions of this committee and understand whether the Access Advisory Committee supports the design approach for 30-foot sidewalks and the 20 feet of a travel lane area or emergency access area in the center of the street, whether the committee supports the use of retractable bollards to allow for the flexibility of the space that could allow for transit or private vehicles to come onto the street at certain times, or to keep the street pedestrian or bike oriented at other times. And then whether the committee believes in supporting the civic and commercial district as being the highest priority investment zone with differentiated paving and some overall differentiated design features to really emphasize that city center area. And then if there are any other elements that you think we should explore, and I would just also add there other things that staff and the design team should really consider as we're working not just in this part of the project in the master plan, and I'm sure we will be back when we're talking more detailed design and engineering level work, but if you have insight on some elements that you think we should make sure to incorporate at this stage, that would be really helpful as well.
All right, so we're
Thank you
open now to
very
comments from our board members.
Can you put those questions back up, please? Thank you.
All right, so I guess from the comments that this woman made, I think Erin Duffy, are we going to have accessible parking on the side streets? Because if you're not allowing someone to be dropped off, who obviously may have some mobility issues, then how have you accommodated those needs? And then having plan checked at the city for 17 years, are you aware that some of the buildings actually go into the right-of-way or underneath the sidewalks? So you have surveys of which buildings those are?
Yes, Chair and committee members, we are aware of the basements that are occurring in State Street proper. There's a number of them, and so some of that, we have sort of a general understanding of where those are now. There's going to be some when we get into detailed engineering and construction level drawings, we're going to get, I think, there's going to be some more nuances there, but that is certainly something we're aware of. In terms of the parking on the cross streets, that's also something that we talked about further in the plan, and we haven't identified yet the actual feet of space, but we did identify having at least one accessible space on either side of the street. So 2 accessible spaces at each intersection, 1 on each side, all the way up and down State Street in this area. It would be great to get feedback from this committee. I mean, we're balancing that as well as that'll also be an area for loading and unloading zones as well. And I anticipate that aside from accessible parking, we may lose some some parking spaces on those cross streets to accommodate for a greater area of accessible parking and a greater area for loading and unloading. I think that's from the standpoint of how much parking we have in the district itself. I think that's okay, being able to provide more areas that that have accessible parking and more areas for loading, unloading, or drop off and pickup on those cross streets, I think makes a lot of sense in that area. And for others that may prefer to park on the street, but perhaps don't need to park on the street, there are parking garages that have 4,000 parking spaces right nearby as well.
Okay, so I mean, I personally don't think it's a master plan if you haven't included accessible features in the master plan, because otherwise they get ignored. They don't get put in. It's kind of the same thing that it got experienced when we had COVID and city gave out permits for parking in the right-of-way, not parking, dining in the right-of-way, and assuming that property owners knew what was required and it's not. So I think it has to be part of the master plan. It can't be that this is what we're thinking or this is what we identify. It needs to be identified on the master plan where these parking spaces are.
Yes. Understood. It is written in the document that there are 2 spaces on each curb. So I apologize. I wasn't clear in that. It is written in the document, but we can certainly look at adding a perspective to visually show what that looks like as well.
Okay, all right. So I know that Michael wants to.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, and I commend you and your team. Really come a long way, and obviously a lot of energy and thought has gone into this. When you spoke at the very beginning, it was very early, spoke about the activation gap. Now it's the highest priority in the 7 to 900 blocks, the civic commercial zone. And I wrote this before he had spoken and described this, but it's relatively quiet, with people after normal 9 to 6 retail hours. Why is that a bad thing? I mean, this is a commercial zone, civic and commercial. I understand our civic leaders want to show it off, and they got great pride in it, and that's where they all hang out and where they work and where their offices are. Who cares, quite frankly? It's a quiet zone. That's okay. Why are we spending scarce resources on this, quote, highest priority when it's a civic and commercial zone, which typically, commercial zones, they go quiet during certain hours. When they're not operating, when the retail stores are closed, when those people are dining and enjoying the entertainment and the arts on either side of where they work. I just don't know why that's a bad thing, that it's particularly quiet. And if it is a bad thing, and the powers that be decide there needs to be more activity there, and this whole length of State Street should be active and bustling all the time, or it's not a success, if that's the thinking. So then you have pop-ups and music and other stuff that fills in that interior space during the non-retail hours, because it's obviously working fine during the retail hours.
Committee member, I think that's great feedback. And it's not that it needs to be activated 24/7 in the center. I certainly take the point that it does operate differently, and it makes sense that we have an area that is operating in a retail fashion or in an office environment. There are so many amazing architectural features in that civic and commercial area, and just from a historic standpoint, the amount of historic buildings in that area with El Paseo, with Plaza de la Guerra of City Hall, and then the Libero Theater right nearby. We haven't really emphasized that city core, that there are those buildings there. So more from I think we're thinking about that question more from the standpoint of, how are we dealing with landscaping, and how are we identifying this space sort of different from the arts and entertainment district?
So, and I appreciate that. I happen to be familiar with another city in another part of the world, in Tel Aviv. And in Tel Aviv, there was a neighborhood, the Bauhaus neighborhood, white old structures by the German architects that had fled and created an incredible, several block area, a very unique and historic designs. And there are walking tours and brochures, and you can go with a guide or by yourself, and you can spend hours or not long. We have these incredible historic buildings. Why isn't Visit Santa Barbara putting together a walking, a brochure so you can self-guide yourself or have the headphones that go along with it? And so now those visual historic pieces that are beautiful, people can go and enjoy them before or after dinner or on their way to the arts and entertainment section. I just don't understand why something that, to me, is something we should take great pride in and we should show off needs to be the highest priority investment zone. I think it's a brochure and some education. And there are models around the world that have highlighted very, very unique, you can go to Barcelona, you can go to several cities that have examples of exactly this, where, people can come and enjoy it at their leisure, or maybe we have tour guides, that can actually tell people the history and what it is. And
Thank you, Michael. Does the city have a total price for what this is going to cost the citizens of Santa Barbara?
Yes, committee members. In the plan, we had a high-level estimate of about $60 million. We're doing more detailed estimating right now to determine exactly how much, if that's sort of right on track or not. In that estimate, we had anticipated about $8 million per block. And of that, almost half of it is stormwater and utility work that, in, I think, the design team's opinion, really needs to happen regardless of if we move the master plan forward or not, because we first don't have stormwater infrastructure between Coda Street and Carrillo Street at all. And because of that, you see sort of in that general area, you see flooding occur even at relatively small rain events. So being able to connect that, I think the other piece with both stormwater and utility infrastructure, if we are looking at building more housing downtown, and this plan calls for 1,000 to 2,000 new housing units at minimum, there have been other groups that have suggested more. But if we focus our housing in the downtown core, downtown area, there will be a need to upgrade a lot of our utility and stormwater infrastructure just to accommodate those developments.
Nick, you had comments?
Yeah. First, thank you for this presentation. Very detailed. Second thought is I'm a little disappointed where it looks like we're already out of allotted scheduled time for discussion. What's that?
That's okay.
Yeah, I realize we can go over, but I feel like we should schedule more time for discussion, because I appreciate that there's 4 very specific questions that we could focus on, but I have thoughts and feedback that go far beyond. So to that end, I would like to request that staff return to us as soon as possible for a detailed discussion just on transportation. And
Well, are you going to share your comments right now, or?
on
have
transportation, I feel like it's too big of a discussion for what we have right now. I'd like to know more about the transportation plan as it is today, and share a number of concerns in detail.
I think maybe, Committee Member Coons, maybe if I could just mention, so from starting in the transit piece or the design piece, let me take a step back. This project includes the design. There's also the operation of the street. So whether the street is operating with certain hours having vehicles on it and certain hours not, or whether it has vehicles 24 hours a day, or whether it has pedestrians and bikes 24 hours a day, that question was asked by council to actually remove out of the master plan entirely. They would like to have a separate discussion on the method of operation after the plan is adopted. So we're really focusing on design. I do think this design can work in any of those configurations. If vehicles are on it 24 hours a day, if vehicles are on it 0 hours a day, or anywhere in between. And the reason for that is the space exists for 2 travel lanes going in each direction, and the retractable bollards exist for either vehicles or transit to go up and down. Now, if we had a space where transit was going in the street itself, but you weren't allowing private vehicle access, there are ways you could have the transit provider either using RFID or having, a clicker to be able to move the bollards up and down as the bus goes through. It also allows for a variety. We showed sort of a smaller scale shuttle, but you could have a larger scale bus on this street too. So there's opportunities for different types of public transit that could be on the street, and I think we would want to try a few different approaches and see what really is working in the environment. We've also been doing some work just trying to figure out, which has not been easy, but where in the U.S. manufactures a smaller scale electric bus type system. And we hear often and I hear it all the time, and I used to love it too, the open air trolley or shuttle that MTD used to operate on State Street. They can't actually operate that exact shuttle anymore because it's not being manufactured in the US and the parts don't exist. So while they have the shuttle, when they break down, they cannot repair them, which is why they went to the closed, you'll see them still, they go around town, and they go on Anacapa and Chapala, the closed smaller scale bus system. I think they're just in talking with community members, there has been a strong desire for some open-aired element of transit on State Street. And so we're trying to figure out how we accommodate that while also getting a larger amount of people on a transit system on State Street.
Thank you for that. That makes sense to separate the discussion from the master plan. So I trust that when you get deeper into that discussion, you'll come back and give us an opportunity to provide feedback there. Do I support the design approach with the 30-foot sidewalks and 20-foot travel lane? Yes. Do I support the use of retractable bollards in the middle 20-foot of right-of-way? Yes. Do I support the civic and commercial district as being the highest priority investment zone? I don't think so. I share Committee Member Rassler's concerns. I see that the State Street closure is clearly working in the 500 block. That's the most obvious success of the closure. I would like to see the priority be invested in the 400 block to figure out, because that's where there's the biggest opportunity in my mind for the closure to expand. What's working in the 500 entertainment zone, 500 block entertainment zone could work in the 400 block if you could solve the traffic and emergency vehicle response issues. That's where I see the most opportunity for this to organically sprawl and be as successful. 6 through 1,000 block, I just don't see it. There's not a lot that can happen there in terms of commerce or how the closing the street would impact that. In fact, I see the vast majority of the commercial property owners or store owners don't want it closed. And I don't support the mid-block closure. I can support in some sort of limited use or flexible use up in the arts district, right? That makes sense. Shut it down at night when there's activities, sure. or, for events. But I think this city wants to see the majority of State Street open for parades, and maybe that can be done with the bollards. But
Can
you
I,
know, I don't see that as the priority, the 700 to 900 blocks.
I think Susan has a comment.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I just wanted to, I don't want to speak out of my, I want to make sure you're done.
yeah, I am.
Okay. I just wanted to comment also. I think that to close the entire street, the 9 blocks is too long. It's too long of a project to make that a completely pedestrian or bike-friendly area. I think in the discussion of whether it's the civic, anyway, I'm going to let Nick's comments remain there. I do think that the car has been sort of become the bad guy in all of our discussions. And unfortunately, people with disabilities rely on their car to get to where they need to go. And to disregard the car and saying it's not important is not really addressing the issue. Now, I do really strongly believe that if there is a street closure, there needs to be a vehicle transport, a shuttle, that a disabled person can use to get up and down the street. So that would be the minimum. But I do not see closing the whole entire street being beneficial for commerce and for access. I would support having a focused area being more pedestrian-friendly and possibly making it smaller than the total 9 blocks. But I don't support the entire street being closed.
I had one more thing I forgot to mention or didn't get to, and that was, I understand there's an infrastructure thing that spans this whole area, and I support that. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to close that whole area to vehicle traffic. Perhaps what I think would be most beneficial would be a staged development, a planned, as the downtown businesses evolve to this new plan. I imagine things will sprawl naturally from the 500 block where it's clearly working, and if the other blocks evolve to support it or require the closure, then we could be poised to move on that as it develops. But I just don't see it on the 700 to 900 block today.
All right. Member Marston or Barbara, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Well, first, thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation, for all your hard work. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear you out. I'm kind of with Nick and Suzanne on the idea of the closure and the vehicle, access. I feel like just in talking to people, members of the public, just in general, that there's, I think, a lot of people who did not fill out the survey, but think privately, that they wonder when State Street is going to open back up to vehicles, and they just don't say that kind of out loud. But I think there's actually a lot more than just the people who contribute to the survey. So I'm not sure it's necessary to keep all 9 blocks closed to vehicle traffic. Perhaps there could be some experimentation over time to see what works to satisfy everybody, find a happy medium that everybody can live with. I do feel like that if we're going to close part of State Street, whether it's the whole 9 blocks or just part of it, I feel like a successful shuttle, some sort of successful shuttle will be critically important to the long-term success of any kind of State Street master plan. I cannot emphasize that. I think the shuttle program has to be a success if you're going to close any of it. And I think not just, I mean, of course, for disabled access, of course. But I think also for the community as a whole. I think people, if you're going to close it, the people who would like to be able to drive, I think they can be won over if there's a successful shuttle program. What personally I think is that, this is a suggestion, that it ought to be more than just the golf carts. While I think the golf carts have their place, I think it's not enough for what you're talking about for a State Street master plan, for increasing the amount of visitors there, for increasing, possibly the number of bikers and whatever, but increasing the amount of traffic, amount of tourism and activities that are going on there. I mean, I would like to see a mix of options, a blend, and then the golf carts could be one option, especially with wheelchair accessible golf carts. But I would like to see some sort of open air vehicle, like if it's like a double-decker bus or something. Maybe there are different things you can explore, look at. I understand the trolley is no longer an option, but maybe there must be something. An open air minibus, or even some sort of smaller bus, an enclosed smaller bus with big windows. It could be, you could have all of those, MTD operating some kind of or even a full-scale bus, whatever. You could have all of those as different options. But there's a lot of people who would want or need to be able to travel down State Street by vehicle, and not just on foot, or not on foot. I do want to say that if we're going to go forward with golf carts, please, could you change the name? Because from a marketing standpoint, I think the loop is not working. And I do have some questions about the bollards, if it's okay to ask. So have you done any, I know you said that they are reliable in general, and probably a long history, and a lot of different cities use them. Have you actually reached out to any other cities, other communities that have them, to see what their experience is, and if they've encountered any problems with them? I kind of wonder, do they require maintenance? And I am curious, what is the average lifespan of the retractable bollards before they need to be replaced? Do other cities have they had issues with the electronic components failing? And I'm also a little bit curious, so when and maybe this is an obvious question, but when the sensors, when they go up and down, so are there automatic sensors to know if there's cars still driving above? Like if you have not just one fire engine, but 3 fire engines all trying to turn the same corner, and the first fire engine clicks the RFD, and it activates the RFID, is it going to know if there's like 3, 4, 5, 6 fire engines behind it all going over?
Committee member, I can start to answer, but I'm also going to have Mr. Nunez come up from Fair and Piers. He did a lot of the work really looking into the retractable bollards, and we did meet with a couple different cities throughout the country that have used retractable bollards, just to understand how they've used them and what types of streets they've used them on. And I know that Miguel and his team has done more in-depth research, so maybe I'll pass it over to him.
just want to make sure everyone else, Jim, did you want to say anything
Well,
before we go to bollards?
we'll go to bollards, because I had a question on bollards, too.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you for the question, committee. It's a pleasure to address you with this information. So we researched this along with the civil engineer on the project. There are numerous examples, as Tess mentioned. We had a conversation with the city of Knoxville, Tennessee. They're one city. We also reached out to New Orleans. They are another city that uses bollards. Most of the example for the automated retractable bollards are international, though there are a number of domestic manufacturers. Those manufacturers all have different components in terms of like the maintenance requirements, the lifespan, the crash rating, which was a question that came up yesterday. But to answer your, I don't have a specific number on the lifespan. They will require some level of maintenance. There's always the possibility that there could be some sort of electronic issue, like which would be addressed with maintenance. What we've heard from most of the cities and research that we've done is that that is rare, that they're reliable and operate regularly. You had a question about the operation. They would typically have some sort of RFID or remote control that the details are still being worked out, but that would likely be held by city staff, fire department, and police, so that access could be given to them when needed. And yes, those remotes and access tools would know if there were, one fire truck or 3 fire trucks that needed to get through, so as to prevent any issues where the bollards are obstructing emergency access.
Okay. Jim?
My question on bollards was, what happens? Am I on now? Yes. Yeah? Yes. Okay. My question on bollards was, what happens if it's stuck up and something's not working, which always happens in the world? How do you lower it down manually?
There's usually, committee members, there's usually a fail-safe where you you can lift up the bollard manually and push it down to get it in.
That was going to be my response. Thank you, Ms. Harris. While they are automated, they all have some manual system that would allow you to, in case something goes wrong, manually raise it or lower it. That would take a little bit longer, right? Maybe folks have to get out and the city staff have to get out and do that, whereas they would normally just be pushing a button, but there is a mechanism to allow that to be addressed.
Would the people on the street be able to lower them?
No, I think it typically requires some sort of special tool, key
Okay.
component that the public would not have access to.
Okay, well, thanks on that. Barbara, are you finished yet? I shouldn't say yet. Are you finished? Okay, go ahead.
I had a question about the bollards. Are they on every block? Wherever the streets are going to be closed, they would be there.
Yes, they would be located on every block at the intersection. So, for example, if you're on one of the cross streets, coming across where State Street, let's say, is north-south, I know it's kind of in between, you would be going, and yes, there would be bollards on both sides of the street for either side, preventing entry or exit from State Street.
So they would basically be located where we have the planters and those kinds of things now, correct?
Similar, yeah, there was, yeah.
Okay.
So one thing that was mentioned is that you're going to be moving the retractable bollards forward, closer to the intersection. Does that affect the stationary, the fixed bollards?
Committee members, so yes, we've done some studies on whether the retractable bollards should be in front of the crosswalk or behind the crosswalk. And after discussing in great detail, feel like they really should be in front of the crosswalk to prevent from vehicles and pedestrians interfacing. The fixed bollards, or the location where we showed, they could also be planters, but they would need to be crash rated, so that they could look different than what a retractable bollard looks like. We're just trying to show that there would be some element there. They would, in this design, because we're proposing an expanded sidewalk of 30 feet on either side, they're intended to really protect the pedestrian on the sidewalk, so that if a vehicle was to do something they're not supposed to and wants to drive up on a sidewalk, they don't have the ability to do that. it's an unfortunate thing to have to think about, but it is something from a safety standpoint that we want to make sure. Just there have been incidents around the country where that, where pedestrians have not been safe in that way, and so that's the intent of having a fixed bollard or a crash-rated planter that would be located on the sidewalk portion. We've talked also about there's ways to do it where you could use seating sort of to double as seating and as a component that could be a bollard.
And I do love that idea, by the way, having a bollard that doesn't look like a bollard, but that looks more like seating or something, or maybe a solar-powered gas lamp, something like that.
That's a great idea.
So I encourage that, and thank you for that.
So, I noticed on the plan, one of the plans that you showed earlier that Mr. Pelizari's talked about. So it looks to me like expanded sidewalks, and we have a transit zone in the middle, and you're separating the two. And we have crosswalks for pedestrians to cross mid-block. And there was a couple turnouts on the plans where a vehicle could turn out and pause to drop off or do something. So it's kind of like what we had. We had sidewalks, and we had 2 vehicles, and we had bike lanes. So you're proposing to just shrink the center zone and expand the pedestrian zone. So they could potentially have vehicles or bicycles and transits.
Yes, Committee Member Tejada.
Yeah.
We are not saying that the street is going to be fully closed
Okay.
to vehicles
Okay.
at all the time. We're not saying that it's going to be fully open necessarily. We are proposing a concept that could work in any way, but the design team feels like there should be the ability for all different users to be able to use the space at the same time and at different times of the day. So there might be areas where you have just pedestrian and bike opportunity for a certain time of the day, and then at other times of the day, you would allow for vehicle
And
access.
hence the retractable bollards, so you have that option.
It sounds to me like it's designed for complete and maximum total flexibility going forward, not knowing what that flexibility is going to require, but providing for all options, which is why the retractable bollards, make absolute and complete sense to me. And the notion that there may be times during the day, it could be early in the morning, 4 to 6 a.m. for deliveries, where the street's open and, the stores and commercial enterprises can get their deliveries done, or maybe it's later in the, the evenings, whatever those are. But to be able to provide the city with the flexibility to address those unknown and unresolved questions going into it, I think, is the absolute appropriate way to approach this unique calculus that you're trying to figure out.
Thank you. It's, that is our intent, is really, we don't know what's going, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known what an e-bike was. And I bet many of the people in this room wouldn't know what that is either, right? And so what is the next thing going to be from an access standpoint, or just from a
Right, how-
world standpoint?
how are we
10 years
gonna
ago, we
use it?
didn't know about COVID-19 either, right? So trying to be flexible enough where this can last for 50-plus years, and we don't need to be reinventing the street over and over.
So you're not focused on hovercrafts just yet, and personal jetpacks?
It's funny you
and-
mentioned that. That comment came up in a meeting yesterday as well, and we are not focused on hovercrafts just yet, but
Personal jetpacks?
Can I ask that we go back to the slide that shows the surface detail texture? Yeah. So with this, I want to express a concern that if these grout lines or whatever you want to refer them to are deep, they create a vibration issue for personal mobility devices. If you go back to the slide that shows the metal sidewalk extension pilot that we're currently doing, I want to share my extreme disappointment with that. That is not an enjoyable thing to drive on a personal mobility device. It makes a heck of a noise, and it's pretty jarring. I have a video, my camera mounted on here, and the vibration and the noise is intense. So when you get to, I appreciate the texture. I appreciate the aesthetic. You know, I don't want to see a plain field either, but minimize the gaps, please. Yeah.
The color differentiation for the aesthetics, as Nick says, is lovely, looks beautiful, but it needs to be functional for all people in all states of mobility, or, you know, all capabilities of mobility. And it just needs to be level, instead of, you know, a dip, you know, wherever there's a line.
And you know, you just reminded me, what's missing from all of these photos are the truncated domes.
Yeah.
The truncated domes, the detectable warnings. None of these show any of those, and those would be required. So you can have a nice yellow strip. I know people don't like it, but that's what the code requires in order to be able to transition from sidewalk to street. So none of these pictures are realistic in terms of that, which is unfortunate because it just
And
says.
would that be required with the curb itself? I thought the truncated domes are typically at the intersection, like at the
Anywhere-
crosswalk and.
Anywhere where you're going to have a hazardous area, which is transportation, you would need truncated domes, so.
To clarify, anywhere where pedestrian traffic enters the vehicle traffic lane.
Right.
And so one of my first thoughts on this was, you're going to have $1 million just in truncated domes. That might be an exaggeration, but it's going to be a lot, and it's going to be a big yellow strip down the middle of this photo.
Or if it's just at the designated crossings.
That's what I sort of,
In
I
the-
recognize that they do need to be put into the plan, and I think when we are doing the detailed engineering work and design, that has been something that the team has been talking about already. And we'll study more exactly where they would be located to ensure they're in the right location.
But the idea of a 4-inch rolled curb block end to block end is not doable in the code. Am I right?
I'm not sure about that. I would have to do some research. I mean, if the intention is for people to be able to walk across, you know, if we're closing the street and so it's just pedestrian use and people are crossing at every place, then
The intention would be for pedestrians to still be on the sidewalk and to be using the mid-block crossings. That's why we added a second mid-block crossing on each street. It's not that all 80 feet are pedestrian only. It's that the 60 feet, the sidewalks are pedestrian only. And then in the center, it's either a bike lane and transit or bike, transit, and vehicles.
Yeah, I think you're treating it as two zones and they don't mix, right? They need to be separate. I think making the sidewalks bigger is great. And so, yeah, it could be a regular curb. I think the whole flat and flexible idea is kind of out.
Can I ask about the,
do you have your mic on?
yeah, it's on. May not be close enough. I'm curious, I like the open air trolley idea. I really like the closed waterfront vehicles as well. I kind of have a recollection that there was a time when there was a flexible version. Maybe the open airs had a temporary closure on them. And I wonder if we have even looked at the possibility of a customization to the existing waterfront trolleys to accommodate more open air feel, right? If the old open air trolleys are not an option because of parts, maybe the existing electric waterfront trolleys could work. I'm a huge fan of those for a number of reasons. I find them to be highly accessible. I wish we had year-round circulation on the waterfront to State Street. I do want to share one more time that we need a permanent MTD bus stop in close proximity to Amtrak. That I don't know how I see this presentation as trying to move us towards a less car-dependent downtown. And if you truly want people, tourists, to come here from, far and wide via train, you need to connect them to the local transit system. And another realization, recent development, is Yardi Systems moving to the Paseo Nuevo. 600 employees, most of which are used to commuting from Goleta. I was one that worked at Yardi Systems for 20 years. I know those people. And, we've got the Surfliner, could bring those people from Goleta to Santa Barbara, alleviate parking. But how are they going to get the last mile? There's no bus stop year-round. It's a summer seasonal thing only. And that's a huge gap in our transit system. And it disproportionately affects the disabled members of our community and potential disabled tourists.
Thank you, Nick. I got a few comments to make. I've lived downtown for 32 years with no car, and I know how important it is to have some kind of transit to get around and do my shopping and medical things. And now, in 2020, I guess, they just canceled the whole shuttle contract. It's really had a big effect on my life and my access to urban opportunities, and many people I know. We're trying to bring in people who are going to live here. There's many elderly people now who don't drive, who live downtown. And they can't get around. And then we're asking people to move here and not bring a car and somehow be able to do all the things you have to do without a car. And if you don't have transit, you can't have that. They're not going to flock here if there's no way to get up and down State Street. We don't have any, as Nick said, this is the only town I know of that doesn't have any transit that goes to the Amtrak station. So you have, just one example, you have all the students from UCSB who are going home for the weekend. They come in on, we have a great MTD system. They get to the main bus terminal. Now they got to walk a mile with their suitcases up and down, and it's ridiculous. A mile walk just to get to the train station. And we have to have good transit all the time, year-round, not this weekend only, summertime only. That's ridiculous. That's going to bring in some tourists, perhaps, but the people who live here are stuck. And then you have all the people who work at the waterfront, hotels and entertainment. They get a low pay, and now they have to drive to get to their jobs. They have a lot more traffic. If you had a good transit system, people could come in from Goleta, Carpinteria, get to the bus station, take the transit down to the waterfront. You wouldn't have to have all that. So let me look at my notes here. Okay, and I agree with Ms. Sorgman about there's nothing really in here about accessibility. And I know it's in the handout, but I would like to see more there. And there's a lot of questions about affordability, of course. But I wonder, quickly, the drainage problem. If we do this, are we going to put the pipes underneath the bike path, the 20-foot area? Because you're going to have curbs, so you're going to have the drains there, right? So this is moving all the drainage from all the other blocks that do have drainage. Their drainage is not going to be accessible anymore, right? You're going to have to do it in this new street.
Most of the committee members, most of the system will need to be upgraded in general, kind of regardless if we're wanting to build more housing downtown. It'll need to connect. So there's a couple things happening. We're proposing a gravel pit that would percolate the water, and then there's also a pipe system that would be under the surface. there's more sort of engineering work that we have a couple teams working on that specific question to understand exactly where we start to connect those two pieces. But certainly, it's an issue.
All right, so I think we've kind of beat this one up a bit.
I've got one more comment about the golf carts. I keep seeing these, and I have yet to find that style transportation system anywhere in the world that is truly accessible. We've somehow allowed an inaccessible one to operate in this town, even though it was highly criticized by this committee. It's kind of a triggering thing for me. But I do know that this one is kind of, it's a two-car system, it looks like, maybe with a kind of a trailer. And have we looked at the possibility of putting an open-air car behind the existing waterfront trolleys? The existing enclosed waterfront shuttle, electric shuttle? And I personally, I find these aesthetically comical, not at all attractive. I really feel like the waterfront shuttle it fits our community aesthetic. And
All right, thank
Committee
you.
members, we
Yeah.
certainly we have been in a lot of conversations with MTD and trying to understand what their vehicles, what can and can't happen in the current vehicles that they have, and they have constraints as well in terms of purchasing different vehicles, and so it's something that we are still. This is just really to illustrate an option. This is not saying this is the shuttle that will be on the street, but there is. We keep hearing over and over from many, many community members a desire for something that is open air that doesn't feel like a bus, is
Right.
different on State Street. So I think there could be, and I really liked the comments from your committee on having multiple options on the street where you could have both things exist. And there's more work for us to do. The other piece is the shuttle we had on the street previously was all electric. We were the first city in the country to have public transit that was all electric. And it's something that I think many in the community are really proud to have had. And so finding a shuttle like this that also meets that criteria is there's just more work that we are trying to do to see if we can find that in the country.
So, I mean, Disneyland, don't they have open trolleys?
Committee members, they do. They're
Some-
not.
okay.
They're not electric.
Then, okay,
And they're not accessible.
They're gas powered.
well, all right.
If I remember correctly, I think the first type of shuttle that MTD bought had windows with gasoline curtains. I think they were open air at the right time of the year.
Okay. All right, so I think we have a public comment.
Do you have a public comment?
All right, so if you want to go ahead and do a public comment?
Hi, good morning. Access Advisory Committee. I'm a resident here. My name is Cassandra Ensberg, and I'm a longtime resident. I'm also an architect in town, and I am a strong advocate for your work and for advocacy. Advocacy for accessibility. So I really want to honor you all for that work. And hello to staff and to Stefanos, our team for the master plan. Thank you. I just have a few things I want to say about this. Of course, as an architect, I realize this is extremely complex. Many, many things have to all be considered to be brought together for it to all work. I know from my experience as an architect that accessibility and ADA very much drives the entire thing. It is, and why is that? Because it is the law. And it's not only important for all of our people who need access, special needs, it is the law. And so I just wanted to take a moment to...
Can you say that again?
It's the law.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So I just wanted to make a couple, what will be obvious to all of you, that it is illegal to exclude parts of the population from the public right-of-way, or in any way cause it to be difficult for them to access the public right-of-way. So in the United States, you cannot legally exclude parts of the population from the public right-of-way. And I know that you all are very aware of that, and you all know that, but there's a lot of tricky things to get that to happen. So I just want to make that, statement. It is the law. All cities are required to provide public transportation to public streets. Yes, this is the law. Cities and other state, local governments are required to ensure that public transportation is accessible so that people with disabilities can reach and use the public streets and transit stops. So it's not something to debate, it's something that is required. And all major cities in the United States with public transit fleets must have fully accessible wheelchair buses and accessible stops. In short, cities are legally obligated to provide accessible public transportation, accessible street connections so that people with disabilities can fully participate in civic life and access public streets. So then there's the question of the golf cart. Is the golf cart considered ADA accessible? Public transportation? No, it is not. It is not classified as a public transportation vehicle in the same way that buses, trains, or shuttles are. So I think that's just really, to understand the difference between the two. So I just want to make those comments, and I also want to say that the design, to me, it has to be driven. I know from my own work, if I'm doing a tenant improvement, whatever it is, I have to start with ADA. It has to be, it drives everything. So we have to understand this now. I do have concerns that have been mentioned by several of you about the textures in the street, the rolled curb. Of course, there was talk about the truncated domes, where they're going to be required. This is really important to understand early, how it all really truly functions. And I will end by saying that I've done a lot of study on these open air, we all love this little adorable trolley. It is not accessible. There are steps going up into it. We all know that there are buses that are available, and I think I came and spoke to you maybe a year ago about this, that we all go to airports and they have these cute little buses. They're not open air. I don't know if you could get one that way, but they have what's called the hydraulic kneeling function. So you come up, the thing hydraulic down, you roll right in with your wheelchair, or if you are a mother with a child, you just go right in, and then these are available. It's not rocket science. They do come in, they're small. You can get small ones. I think MTD has them. And I hope you just allow me a couple more seconds here. I've been waiting a long time. But I think that it's, this is required. We have to have it. And we could get some that maybe have a custom paint job on them so that they're more acceptable for our Santa Barbara style. Maybe you can get an open air one. I don't know. But the main thing is it has to be accessible. Yeah. So I just want to also just end by saying gratitude and appreciation to everyone. I totally, especially to our team here, I especially understand and recognize the complexity of it. That's why you do a master plan, is to go through all these things and be sure you have checked all the issues. So I support that fully, wholly, and I know we'll get to a place, but as far as accessibility, ADA has to be met. So thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come here and voice your opinion and let us know, and we appreciate that.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, and yeah, just as a reminder, I mean, it still stings a little that this Access Advisory Board was asked to review the little golf cart that we have that's not accessible, and yet the city continues to fund that, despite the fact that it's not accessible. And so I think there's a little I don't know what's the right word to say.
Frustration.
Frustration and disconnect, no confidence in the city's commitment to provide those features. And yeah, even to the point of some of your photos not showing some of the accessible features. It just shows that someone is really not thinking about it. And so it gets left to the last minute or when someone brings it up, and it's not given the priority that Ms. Cass actually just shared with you, that it's part of the law, that we can't exclude people. And so, yes.
I think just in response to that, because I really appreciate the comment, and I also want to assure all of you that as staff and the consulting team, that we do take that really seriously. We recognize that ADA is the law, and not only recognize it, that has been something that we've thought of throughout. And so I just take that because I hope that this committee does not think that staff is not trying to make things more accessible. That's why I'm in front of you to have this conversation, and I would love your help and guidance as the committee to make sure that we make it the most accessible place. The whole point of doing this project overall is to make it a civic place that is allowable for everybody to come and experience downtown, regardless of if you want to pay for something, regardless of who you are in the community, but to make it a community space. That's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So I fully respect that, and I want to work with this committee and make sure that we make it the best place that it can be.
I have a concern that all of these architectural renderings fail to show that, huge requirement of the truncated domes. And so I feel like the public, council, all the stakeholders are reviewing these aesthetics that aren't accurate. These architectural renderings, that look beautiful, but they may not look so great when you have 100 continuous feet of truncated domes, 3 feet wide.
Committee Member Kuntz, we can certainly add the truncated domes. In talking with our building department so far, my understanding is that since the road is separated in space, that the domes would be located where the mid-block crossing intersections are, as well as the intersection crossings between the cross streets and State Street, and not the full 500 feet of length on State Street itself. I will certainly circle back with our building department to confirm that that's still the approach that they would consider, and make sure that we show it in the architectural renderings as well.
So just confirm there will be no sections of State Street that will be flush to the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is a curb on the
Okay.
street.
Okay.
So
I'd like
Tess,
to
I
make
have
one concern that I have. Because I don't drive, I bought an e-bike in 2009. So I had an early e-bike experience. But now I see what I call electric motorcycles being driven up and down the street, and I've met many people who don't come downtown anymore because it's too dangerous for them. And I'm just shocked that somehow the city council and the police can't figure out how to stop this antics. It's hard to believe, but one time I was a punk kid too, okay? And I know how those guys feel, but it's not something that should be allowed here. They could be confiscated or fined or get the parents involved, but you're losing people to come to town and spend money to placate the 13 and 14-year-old crowd who just wants to come down and have fun and show off.
It's a global epidemic, Jim.
Well, I know.
I certainly hear that a lot, and I recognize it being on the street all the time. For the master plan piece of it, there is a lot that needs to be done now in terms of enforcement, and could be done differently, I think. And there has been different direction from council for staff for that. In the master plan, there is a discussion at the end in chapter 6 in the implementation section on additional enforcement mechanisms for the police department to undertake around enforcement for bikes.
Well, I think they should do it sooner than waiting for the master plan. I mean, there's something
Certainly understood.
simple, like
I'll add
license
that
plate.
comment.
I had one more question, Tess. In terms of the master plan and in terms of deciding which blocks are closed, which blocks are open, when are those decisions going to be made, or is it still going to stay ambiguous, or all of the above?
Committee Member Tahada, it's a great question. I mean, the design itself, we weren't indicating that there would be a block that was fully closed all the time or fully open all the time.
Right.
Originally, we had proposed 12 hours, it would be pedestrian, bike, and transit, and 12 hours would allow for vehicle access, and all 24 would have transit access. Council, from that, council had requested that that be taken out entirely and that
I
that
see.
discussion
That's
happen
not part of the
later.
and
So
that's
it's
part of the
not-
transportation
It won't be
discussion.
part of the master plan,
Okay.
and the design could still work in any configuration that we choose, and then I think down the road, they'll have the conversation around what hours we put towards it.
I find it interesting to separate the two. But anyway,
All right. Okay, well then we thank you, or does, we have one more comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the signage, which is, I understand, going to be installed in phase one, are you planning to install speed limit signs so that vehicles and e-bikes and bicyclists will know what the speed limit is? And could you?
Committee member, it would be possible to do it, and we've had this discussion a little bit internally as well as with the design team. Our goal is really to first design the street so that it would start to be pretty uncomfortable to go anything higher than 25 miles an hour. 25 miles is the limit on all downtown streets, so it, that would be the very maximum mile per hour that you could have. Ideally, this street would operate more at 10 to 20 miles an hour for any mode user, and I think how we do that is really more geared around texture and elements in the street to make it so that by expanding the pedestrian area and confining the vehicle space a little bit further, it still allows that function, but it doesn't allow you to speed up the street in the same way. Same thing with a one-way versus two-way configuration, because we have had a lot of discussions also about should it be a one-way street instead of both ways, and we believe it should remain as two ways, both from an access standpoint, so that you can easily circle and come back to where you were if you need to. But also that friction helps slow speeds down a little bit just naturally. One-way streets typically are over 10 miles an hour faster, just in a driver, because you feel like you can just kind of freely go up without anybody. So we're working on trying to figure out from a design standpoint, we don't want to end up with a bunch of signs that say 20 miles an hour up and down the street, but there's some balance there.
Okay. And are there any provisions or options, or is there anything that can be done if the e-bikes choose to go up the curb and onto the sidewalk and bike down the sidewalk instead of the lane that they're supposed to stay in?
Committee member, part of that would certainly be additional enforcement. We are also looking at different furnishing elements that would help restrict anybody from coming up onto the sidewalk and using the space in a way that's not geared towards, general sidewalk use.
All right, then I think we are done with this, so we go on to the next item, which is the nomination of either individuals or organizations that we'd like to nominate for, to see them recognized for the achievements in enhancing awareness of removing barriers related to accessibility within the city of Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Well, did you have some?
I was just going to say, I'll turn this over to the committee for discussion. There's really, this has been a committee-driven initiative, and it continues to be, so I'm interested in hearing what you all have to say.
I'd like to nominate the film festival for their work that they did for the Just a Five.
I would support that nomination. I'd like to nominate Nature Tracks for their efforts to make our outdoor trails more accessible to our disabled public.
Could you explain what they've done so far?
Nature Tracks is a small local nonprofit that has a platform. It's a kind of tank tread platform that you can mount a manual wheelchair to or a power chair to. And then it's got its own battery operated control joystick and allows people in a wheelchair to go on all terrains, and they provide this service free to anyone who wants to use it, and they're trying to branch out and support Parks and Rec's summer camp program with volunteer support and vehicle service, and I think it's a great little organization.
Did you get permission from Parks and Recs to do that?
No, they've volunteered. They've offered, but I don't know
Okay.
what the status is. Unfortunately, the initial response was a decline. They weren't interested. They didn't think there was a demand, and I think that's some
Wait.
myopic thinking.
Who declined?
I don't know. Someone in Parks. Nature Tracks doesn't want this to become a political thing. They're not trying to make waves. They offered, and the response they got was, no, thank you, there's no demand for it. And I'm concerned that's myopic thinking, but that's another thing
Right.
that we can deal with Parks.
Okay.
I'd like to recommend Hillside, and I've retired from Hillside effective February 28th, so there's no conflict of interest. But I'd like to recognize them for the second annual, and now it will be an annual, Disability Independence Day Festival. This year will be on July 25th. The actual Independence Disability Day is Sunday the 26th, but this is a Saturday festival. Last year was the first one. Big success. A lot of other partner organizations, a lot of community collaboration, and community support. And I just think it's something that, in terms of raising awareness, enhancing awareness, and removing barriers, Hillside continues to do that, not only for their own residents, but really for the broader community. And this community-wide Independence Day Festival last year had several hundred people in attendance, and we're expecting it to be much larger this year.
Where is it? And what
It's
was
at Hillside. It's
Okay.
at the facility 2135 Veronica Springs Drive.
Okay.
And it's a pretty much an all-day, or like 10 in the morning to 3 or 4 in the afternoon, Disability Day Festival with education, programs, activities. I was in the dunk tank last year. But all the other organizations come and set up different, booths. There's no charge, no cost, I think, other than nominal cost for food.
and what's the date again?
25th, July 25th.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll
A month away.
read about it in the Independent and online elsewhere.
I have a couple of nominations. Are you
Yes,
finished?
yes, I
Okay.
am. Thank you.
Okay, first, I'd like to nominate Dee Duncan. Dee is the founder of New Beginnings Travel. She's also done a lot of other things, founder of Ashley House, been involved with Devereaux Foundation. She received special recognition from Santa Barbara Special Olympics and blah, blah, blah. Point is, Dee just retired this year, so she spent her lifetime in service, basically, to the disabled community. And this being her retirement, I thought it would be a nice time to honor her lifetime of service. So that's why I'm nominating her. And she's also a really good person, too. I'd also like to nominate Hearts Therapeutic Equestrian Center. Many of you probably know of them already. They just did a program with Access Central Coast, which was, what I'm told, very successful. Everybody thought it was a big success. I have visited them, and I was really impressed with their facility. And they have horse therapy horses, which is really cool. They work with all types of people, all abilities, all ages, verbal, nonverbal, mobile, non-mobile. They work with people with dementia, children. They have a program for veterans. They're working on a future program for first responders. I was able to see one of their programs in action, and as I thought it was a really great organization. So I'm nominating them.
All right, so we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Yep. Anybody else have nominations? Nope. Okay. I support all of these nominations.
So do I.
I was gonna say, we're not capped by it, we don't have any,
No limit.
there's no limit, right?
There's no limit. The only thing that I've kind of wanted to, the structure I wanted to provide is a person or organization named as the recipient and a clear acknowledgement of what we're recognizing, right? Dee Duncan is a good example. We're recognizing her like lifetime achievement and commitment to accessibility with Nature Tracks. It's for their effort to make our outdoor community more accessible.
Similar for the film festival to enhance
Yeah.
accessibility
Yep.
to the broader community, and Hillside would be for raising awareness community-wide through the Disability Independence Day Festival,
Yep.
and Hearts Therapeutic for providing direct programs and services to those with accessibility issues.
Yep.
Providing them with
Like special
experiences,
needs.
special needs, experiences they would otherwise be unable to participate in or experience.
Exactly.
All right, so I have a task for those who made the nominations. If you can just email me what it should recognize, and then we'll get those to Brian.
Okay.
But we need to make a motion to accept all of those.
So moved.
All right, then we're going to.
And we're not voting today. We're not voting today. We're
Why
just
not?
nominating.
Why?
Wait, are we voting
I
today?
think we are.
Yeah,
We are voting today.
Why not? Why not?
yeah, because I think we have to get this done in time
Okay,
to be able to.
Got it.
Okay.
And is there, do we have a limit in terms of the number? Do we have that? We
No.
don't have that.
No.
Okay.
I move we accept all 5 nominations. for-
Second.
All right, so all those wait, do we want to take a roll call, or do we just open?
So I would like
All
to
right.
not vote for one.
Okay,
So are we voting for them, like, are we
all right,
voting?
so let's vote for.
Well, how about discussion, right? There's one you
Okay, so
don't want to support?
It's personal,
Okay,
and I don't really want to get into the detail.
okay.
Okay, so let's go.
So I could recommend that you vote for all with the exception of the one,
Okay.
and then maybe you can get a vote on that, and then the other one, if you want to abstain or you want to vote against it, leave that up to you. But that might be a way to get through it more quickly
Yeah.
than doing each one
Right,
individually.
right,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, so do you want to go ahead and make the motion to accept all except one?
No, I think they all should be accepted. I'll just abstain from the vote
Okay,
on one of them, yeah.
but,
The vote's on all of them together.
yeah, we're voting on all of them
Okay,
together.
so I'll abstain.
All right,
Yeah.
all right, so then everyone is in favor, and there's one not exemption, abstention, sorry.
Yes.
My brain,
Yes.
exception.
That's
Okay,
what
all
I'll do.
right. All right. So
And I
do we
believe
have
we're
that clear?
done.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'd be 5-0 and 1 on the vote.
Okay.
Brian, when is your talk to council? Is it fall or November?
I
or-
just turned the page, and it says August 21st. That's the next AAC meeting is August 21st, 2026. I haven't selected a date yet. It's usually, sometimes it ends up being all the way into October, but I think because we have these nominations in place now, we can be earlier. So hopefully it'll be around that August, September
Okay, do you need
timeframe.
any help from us helping you, or you don't write it yourself, or do you want some ad hoc?
No, what we said was that for those people that nominated, if they could email me the description or the
No, I'm talking
acknowledgement.
about his report to council about the AAC.
Oh,
I mean, part of it will be this nomination piece, but then there's other things like what we've accomplished throughout the year. Let me figure out what the timing is going to be on that, and perhaps we could have a discussion on the 21st to get committee feedback. Also, I know at one time there was an ad hoc for the annual report. I don't know if that's still in place.
I think it is, I know that we procedurally are concerned with having ad hocs that go on perpetually. If you don't see the need for an ad hoc, we could move to dissolve it today.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that we do that
Okay.
today, just because it's a limited agenda. But I do have the monthly call with the chair and vice chair. I think it just got bumped. It's not going to be next week, it'll be the week following. But we can have a check-in at that time just to decide how we're going to handle the annual report.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, then, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.